Welcome to this ORCID training video on inter-entity trade. My name is Natalie, and today the focus will be on using audit logs and periodic processing in inter-entity trade. This training video coincides with new features in the latest inter-entity product update, where the date created and the date amended are now included in the trade logs and can be used to filter. Why use the inter-entity trade audit logs? And that refers to both APAR and OENPO. Firstly, you want to confirm that the transactions have been created as expected. You can find the target transaction number and or the batch and entry number. If there has been an error, the audit log will help you identify the error and the reason for the error. So you should always look at the log when there is an error so that you get a chance to correct the error before anyone finds a missing transaction and creates this transaction manually, which may break the chain of the transactions that you have set up. The process is the same for both APAR and OEPO. You first review the audit log, fix the error, and then use the periodic processing to reprocess the error transactions. This then uses the existing audit log entries to reprocess the transactions. And as a result, we do not recommend that you clear the log entries because the audit log is used for the ongoing processing and chaining of the transactions. You have the ability to use some screen filters. Use Ctrl F to filter on any column that is displayed on the screen and set up the manual filter and clear the filters. Most recently, we've added the date created and the date amended filters, which should make identifying the transactions much easier. And there are also some inter-entity trade reports that you can run. The most common errors in Trade AP and AR relate to ZAPI errors, not being able to connect to the target database, GL accounts or distribution set not being configured, the vendor or the customer being inactive, fiscal period being closed, document numbers being invalid, and optional fields not being set up. So we're now going to look at a few examples of these. The first example we're going to look at is focusing on ZAPI errors to connect to the database. This applies to both APAR trade and OENPO trade. We'll look at an example with AP and AR. In this example, I have just posted an AR invoice in ORC LTD that should create an AP invoice in ORC IN2, and I'm getting this message by user ID. So I know that the transaction hasn't been created in the target database. So what I need to do is go to IET Inquiries and use APAR Trade Audit Inquiry. On this log, I can filter through the top of the screen by status, or I can filter by date. So I'm just going to look at all transactions created today, and I can see my errors enabled to open a connection to the database. To fix the ZAPI errors, there are two main things to look at. In IET Setup, Trade Organization Setup. This is where we configure the user and password for each company. So come in here and check maybe my user has changed or my password has changed. So re-enter it and save. The next thing I need to do is make sure that I untick this workstation uses Integration Access Pack on the IAP tab. Now that I've corrected that, go to IET Periodic Processing, APAR Periodic Processing, and reprocess the transactions that are in error or pending. And I can select all or just AR to AP. When this process is completed, I can go back to IET Inquiries, APAR Trade Audit Inquiries, refresh, and I can see that now I've got a target document number in IN2, so batch number 33 and document entry number 1 and document entry number 2. So I can filter by any column on this. So I can go Control F and filter by posting sequence, equals or greater than or not equal to. One that's particularly useful, the status. So I can Control F and find all the transactions that have been exported, or all the transactions that are in error and therefore haven't been exported yet. If you have ZAPI database connection issues in OEPO Trade, it's exactly the same process. You would go to OEPO Trade Audit Inquiry and OEPO Trade Periodic Processing once you have updated your trade organization setup. And you can see that in the visual process flow. Next example, I can now connect to the database. I've just posted an AR invoice entry. I'm expecting to see an AP invoice. So I'm going to go into my AP AR Trade Audit Inquiry. And on transaction status, I'm going to filter where the status is not exported. So that should give me all my error message. So here I'm seeing that vendor 9911 is inactive, so it can't create the target database. So the fix for that is to go in org in2, my target database, make the vendor active, into entity periodic processing, APAR periodic processing, process all my documents in errors. I'm going to AR document, select the one that's here, and reprocess. Come back to the APR Trade Audit Inquiry, refresh, and there is nothing left in the log because here I'm filtering on transactions where the status is not exported. You can come back here, Control F, clear the filter, and I can see that my invoice 33 has created AP invoice 33, and I can also filter by date created. This is part of the new features released at the end of 2018. We have seen various error messages that you get in the APR Trade Audit Log around the vendor or the customer doesn't exist, or the vendor or the customer is inactive. The solution to that is to create the customer vendor or make it inactive and then reprocess through APR or OEPO periodic processing, as the same applies to APAR periodic processing and OEPO periodic processing. In APAR trade, we can also get errors around GL accounts and or distribution codes and or distribution set not existing or being inactive. So in this example, I've posted AR batch 89. That should create an AP invoice batch. If I go to the APAR trade audit in my source company, I can see there was an error and I can see that it's telling me the distribution set rent is inactive. So I can go into APAR trade setup and look at the trade partnership for customer 9992. I should also double check on the APAR trade options that I'm using account-to-account distribution set mapping. If I'm using account-to-account distribution set mapping, then I need to map the relevant GL account to a distribution set or a GL account in the target company. So in this example, I was posting to GL account 4210-1, which should go to distribution set rent, and it happens that that distribution set is inactive in the target company. So I have two choices. I can change the distribution set that I'm using to a new one if it has changed, or I go and make it active in the target company. And then the final step, once more, is to go to IET Periodic Processing, APAR Periodic Processing, and choose the documents we want to reprocess. In APAR trade, some errors may occur when you're trying to create AP documents from AR documents with errors regarding the document number. So if we look at audit inquiry and filter on the transaction in error, we can see the message, but document number, IN, etc. for vendor 9004 already exists. The AP invoice cannot be created. This is the type of error that may require manual transaction or may require amending the mapping of trade options, AP-AR integration. If I look at AP to AR document, I can see that the AP document number in this setup is made up of the organization ID and the document number. So that should make a unique AP document number. However, if your original document number is very long, when we add the organization ID to it, it may, as in the example above there, truncate the document number and create duplicates. The transaction that is in error should then be manually created, and then you may need to amend this, either your document numbering to make them a little bit shorter or remove the organization ID. In some example, the trade audit will indicate a success. For example, here I can see that I've posted an AR receipt batch in ORC IN4 and it has created an AP batch number 42 in ORC IN3 as expected. In my trade options, I have configured to auto post when I create an AP invoice or an AP payment batch. However, in this particular example, if I go to my payment batch list in ORC IN3 and I look at batch 42, I can see that it has not been posted. This is not an inter-entity trade error as such, as the batch was successfully posted, but it cannot be posted because this check code for this bank has been configured that I need to print the check, so I cannot post the batch until the check has been successfully printed. So we have looked at SAPI errors and how you typically go to the trade organization setup in inter-entity setup to resave your user ID and password, and that often needs to be redone after an upgrade or a server move. And you also need to make sure that you do not tick use IEP on the workstation. Regarding fiscal year, fiscal period, customer, vendor being inactive, generally find out what the problem is in the trade audit inquiry, and then you go back to the trade periodic processing screen to process either a range of documents or one document that is in error. Finally, we have looked at some issues you may have with invalid distribution accounts or invalid GL account. The solution to that is to make your distribution set or your account active. If you use account-to-account mapping in the trade options, you also need to make sure that your AP and AR trade setup includes your GL account and or distribution set mapping. And then you go to AP/AR periodic processing to reprocess. We have discussed how some errors may be in the trade audit logs, but you may need to create a transaction manually to fix it, and that's, for example, if you cannot create an AP invoice because that vendor document doesn't exist, type of error which is not in the error log because the AP payment is created successfully, but we cannot automatically post the target batch in AP because the check stock code includes check and requires the check to be printed successfully before the batch can be posted. Little mention on optional fields. When you get optional fields not set errors, you need to make sure that the optional fields exist in AP and AR at the same levels. For example, AP invoice and AR invoices, or AP invoice detail and AR invoice details. If the same field names exist on both those locations, then inter-entity will set the optional fields in the target document coming from the source document or using the default values. For more information on inter-entity trade, you can go to our website and look at the inter-entity trade product page where you will find the various training videos. Thank you for watching.